This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Welcome to the latest, the freshest edition of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. I'm your host, Vito Geronimo Chirco, along to my usual sidekick and broadcast partner and fun. That is Doc from Doc and Jack, John Charles Macaroon. John, how are you doing?
Welcome, everybody, to the first annual Vito Awards. Vito and I had a conversation, and we wanted to talk about how we wanted to wrap up the baseball year, because next week we're going to take a break, maybe just take 1, maybe 2 weeks off from the Tigers Talk podcast. And I said, you know what? Every great podcast has to have an award show. We have to recognize those that were great for the Tigers and nationally across Major League Baseball. So everybody listening in, this is the first annual Vito Awards. Throughout the show, we'll sprinkle in a couple of the categories, and Vito will share how he came up with the winner, maybe some honorable mentions. And then we got to talk about, because really earlier on Tuesday, there's been some news made regarding maybe some potential acquisitions the Tigers might make, who they're looking at to potentially replace Jose Iglesias. So lots to get to, Vito. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, lots to get to, and I will be handing out the first ever of Vitos. The Vitos, I like to say, like the SBs, the Vitos. So best pitcher overall, maybe best pitcher in both leagues. You know, overall top hitter, maybe top hitter in both leagues. And then for sure the best overall player, which will be a position player. I'll just give you that much already. And you probably know who I'm going to pick, but I've got some media members that also chimed in on that, as well as my brother, as well as my dad I had chime in too. These guys that watch baseball all year long and gave their opinion. And Tony Paul gave his opinion. Anthony Fennick gave his opinion. Pat Henkin, the guest on Vito's Sit Down last week, he gave his opinion. So we'll get to that eventually. And Brenden Kudla will also join us for a phone segment, and he'll give us his opinion on who's the overall league most valuable player.
Want to thank the sponsors of the Tigers Talk podcast. Want to thank Legacy Football Organization. And I want to thank the Detroit Sports Commission for making this podcast possible. We greatly appreciate all our sponsors. All right, Vito, let's just start with the Tigers. Who gets the Vito for the best Tiger of the year?
Best Tiger of the year, I would give it to Nick Castellanos, and I thought of this, in August, I would say, because there's nobody else to really give it to. Now, defensively, not great, but who else are you going to give it to, Doc? I mean, if it's not Nick Castellanos, there's really no pitcher deserving of it. Like Matthew Boyd, I liked for most of the year, but he had his struggles. Norris wasn't good enough, was hurt. Fulmer was hurt, wasn't good enough. Zimmerman was good for the start and then tailed off. Fires was traded. Maybe Fires would have won it. Wasn't even a Tiger in the second half of the season, really. So I would have to give it to Nick Castellanos despite his shoddy D in right field.
So for those that remember history, the very first Vito Award was given out to Nick Castellanos of the Detroit Tigers for being the 2018 Tiger of the Year. All right, Vito. So you saw the news. I had sent you some articles, some links regarding what could be taking place for the Detroit Tigers in terms of free agency. What'd you make of it?
Well, I think it's just about, some cheap bargains, relatively speaking, that the Tigers could target this offseason. And we'll see what they do. They need to upgrade at shortstop. We know that much. And starting pitching-wise, it seems like they're going to be active and add a cheap veteran-type free agent again. I think Drew Pomeranz was mentioned, formerly the Boston Red Sox, was good with the Oakland Athletics a couple of years back, but was used primarily out of the bullpen then, barely even pitched, if he even pitched in the playoffs. So this guy, you're going to probably get him for relatively cheap. And we talked about it before, like the highest price guy you might have to pay for is Jeremy Hellickson. That might be still in their price range, but he's going to be more money than, I think, Pomeranz, more money than Edwin Jackson. So I see the Tigers signing somebody, but it's going to be a veteran type that's going to come cheap. They're not going to sign anybody else for big money. Like Patrick Corbin, he's the name that's the number one target among free agent starting arms. Tigers aren't going after him. There's no way that's going to happen.
So what you're saying is look for affordable talent that the Tigers could bring in here that could fill some needs. What need do you think is best going to be filled via the free agent route, as opposed to homegrown guys or guys that are already here on the roster that have maybe had a little bit of experience but not the most talent?
Well, like shortstop, Freddie Galvis is a name that's been mentioned. Jordy Mercer, who played for the Pirates. like, this would be a horrible option, but a huge fallback option that was mentioned by Jason Beck of MLB.com. He said Alcides Escobar of the KC Royals, who has had an OPS of, 600 below the last couple of seasons, can't hit to save his life. And I love throwing around that phrase, but truly it's applicable to Alcides Escobar at this point in Escobar's career. I mean, I don't think he's even better than an Omar Infante when the Tigers had Infante. He's of a less caliber, and he's a less quality hitter than Jose Iglesias. I'd rather just bring back Iglesias than settle on Alcides Escobar. But once again, he was mentioned, and this is from Jason Beck's latest article on the Tigers and free agent targets, and he put that, potentially Alcides Escobar being viewed as a fallback option. So remember, that is the way to view him. He's a definite fallback option. And once again, Drew Pomerantz, he says in this article, fits that Mike Fiers profile, having gone from a 17-win season in 2017 to an injury-plagued season this year. So maybe the Tigers add him, but obviously not a lot of intriguing guys the Tigers are going to target and more than likely attain on the open market this offseason.
Okay, of the names that you saw from Jason Beck, maybe Anthony Fennick regarding the replacements for Jose Iglesias, let's look at that for a moment. Anthony Fennick of the Free Press, Detroit Tigers beat writer, kind of gave some names and lists of some people that could be defensive replacements for the Detroit Tigers at the shortstop position via free agency. Anybody catch your name, or who would be the best fit at that position?
I think at shortstop, it would be Jordy Mercer. Once again, I already mentioned these guys, or Freddie Galvis. And then there's also this guy who I always butcher his name, but another shortstop guy that's a good defender, Heckavaria, however you say his last name, who's been a major leaguer for a while. I would think him or Galvis. And, once again, those names were mentioned by Jason Beck. Now, Joel Lugo could, I guess, take the position internally. DJ LeMahieu just won the Gold Glove in the National League for second baseman, so maybe you shift over somebody from second base to shortstop to take that job over at least on a part-time basis, and you kind of platoon that shortstop position in 2019. Because I would like LeMahieu over all of those shortstop options that I just mentioned. And LeMahieu didn't have the greatest offensive season. Remember Chris Newell, the manager of the Birmingham Bloomfield Beavers in the USPBL, who has tweeted at us, commented on stuff via Twitter recently, and shown us some praise and love, and we appreciate that, Chris. I think he does try to tune in here and there to our podcast, and he trained DJ LeMahieu. LeMahieu from Brother Rice became this great hitter, all-star caliber player, a guy that's been, Silver Slugger-esque at his position of second base, Gold Glove caliber guy. He's won multiple Gold Glove awards now at second base. I would like to add him. But once again, you got to view it with this mindset. The Tigers aren't trying to win in 2019. So the likelihood of them adding even a DJ LeMahieu is very unlikely.
Understood. Real quickly, your thoughts regarding Jose Iglesias here in Detroit. Why didn't it work out? Why do you think his bat really never kind of caught on after the first couple seasons? I mean, once he came here, I felt like he could have been the shortstop of the future. I mean, he's just a wizard defensively. I mean, it was one of those moves that was really praised by Dave Dombrowski, and everybody looked at it and said, wow, they went out and got a young prospect from the Red Sox. But it kind of makes you go and makes you question sometimes, look, if an organization is willing to give up on a young prospect, maybe there are some red flags, some things that make you concerned regarding him. I'm just kind of questioning a little bit why it went south for Jose Iglesias. Why is he not on a team anymore?
Well, I think because they realize he can't hit really good enough to be a starting shortstop. Now, the thing is, he had a good offensive season this year, but once again, they let him go, and he's going to walk and become a part of another team because they're not trying to win. So signing him to a contract that he desires, as in Iglesias, for long-term isn't worth the money that Iglesias will get.
Yeah, what's his market rate going to be?
I would say probably $6.5 to $7.5 million. Let's say he gets $7.5. And I would think he gets 3 years. He's going to aim for 3 years. Maybe he only gets 2, but he gets 3 years. That's a lot of money to dole out to a guy that isn't probably a part of your long-term plans. That's how I view it, Doc.
Understood. It's just one of those situations in which a little bit disappointing in that a lot of the Tigers hitters kind of are one-dimensional. A lot of people will say the big critique of the Tigers is they got a bunch of 4A talent, talent that is good enough to be a little bit better than being placed in the minor leagues, but when they get up, nobody's been like, wow, and prove themselves and shine to the point where you go, you can't send them back down. Even Candelario struggled.
He did. At times he did.
Lugo struggled a little bit.
Lugo, I think, is dismal. I mean, and he might be your starting shortstop. Now, the guy I mentioned before, okay, how to pronounce his name, and it's, ready? Adani Echevarria. There we go. So it's, it's hard to say. Like I said, I couldn't, muster the energy and get it right before. He is out of Cuba, just like Jose Iglesias. He is right-handed, just like Iglesias. Iglesias had a better offensive season than this guy, but the thing is, Echevarria is going to be viewed as a guy that the Tigers look at to replace Iglesias because he's going to come cheap for the Tigers. So he's a free agent this season. I know he hasn't made a ton of money throughout his career, and he's coming off of a season spent with the Rays, the Pirates, and the Yankees. Actually, the Yankees, too. He had a $194 in 18 games with the Yanks. Spent most of the time in 2018 with the Rays, hitting .258, but his OPS was .621, and the best it got was with the Pirates in 15 games, and it became .672. So this is the guy that's going to record an OPS below .650, which is worse off than Iglesias. But once again, Iglesias is going to go for more money. Adeiny is going to go for less money, and that's why Adeiny is a likable replacement for Jose Iglesias at shortstop next season.
All right. You sent me a link to Ken Rosenthal's offseason preview from The Athletic. What caught your attention there?
I would say that he thinks the White Sox and the Reds, teams like that have lost 95-plus games now for a few seasons, are going to look at Bryce Harper and Manny Machado, and the White Sox are going to have a shot, outside shot at least, at Manny Machado. So how about that? Maybe the White Sox finally going for it. And I've made fun of the White Sox with my brother. My brother, Dominic, he loves the White Sox. And I've ridiculed him for his love and fandom of the White Sox recently because I've told him, when's the last time the White Sox have been relevant? Guess what? You know when it came? In 2012. They blew the division down the stretch, the White Sox did, giving it, pretty much just handing it to the Tigers. And, that was the best season Robin Ventura ever had. He got ousted, then eventually a couple seasons later, maybe a little bit too late for White Sox fans. And the White Sox never have achieved anything of relevance since 2012 when they blew that divisional lead once again down the stretch to the Tigers, who then, remember, went to the World Series. But anyways, that point is mute right now because you look at the White Sox and what they are now. And what they need to do is start spending some big dollars on their major league roster. Now, they did attempt to do so a couple of years back and further back than that when they signed Adam Dunn and guys like that. And they acquired Todd Frazier a couple of years back. So they have tried to win. But now if they're going all in, they might sign Manny Machado. But they better be very willing to open up the checkbook. If they're going to land Manny Machado, you're not going to get him for cheap, Doc.
I want to talk to you about the division that the Tigers are in real quickly, though. Hit me with another Vito award.
Another Vito award. I'm going to have to give the American League, the top hitter in the AL, to JD Martinez because he almost recorded the Triple Crown this year, came very close to doing so. Would have been the first time since Miguel Cabrera did it with the Tigers. So I love JD anyways. I got to give it to JD, the best hitter in the American League.
Vito award for best hitter in the American League, J.D. Martinez. Just you saying that stings because
it does sting, doesn't it?
A guy that was here at the Tigers, maybe we didn't get enough for him, goes to Arizona, then goes and signs a massive deal. Kind of a situation in which, for Boston, how perfect was that? I mean, they waited it out, and they finally signed him to that big deal a little bit later because he took a little bit less than what many people thought he would take, but he still got a big, fat contract, and he hits there in Boston, a perfect lineup for him to crush it, and he delivered. Not only throughout the regular season, but the entire course of the postseason. He was there, and he was a key contributor. So J.D. Martinez gets in a Vito award the first go-around. Good stuff.
Talking about our division, you brought up the division. J.D. Martinez, a former member of the American League Central Division. How about the Cleveland Indians? Looking to deal arms, such as Corey Kluber, Carlos Carrasco potentially this offseason. Looking to revamp their ball club, Doc.
That's what I was going to ask you. I was going to say, you know what? Cleveland has been the team that you're kind of looking to as the standard, but I'm hearing that they're potentially going to be maybe reshifting and refocusing now too because of the fact that they haven't been successful and maybe they take a step back. So that's the part that's always, when you look at it with baseball, is that, you can get into the postseason if you play in a terrible division, if you can go for it. And so it stinks in that, you know what, the entire AL Central as a whole is going to be down the next couple years, but is Cleveland still the team to beat in the AL Central? And what do the Tigers got to do to compete with the likes of those that are a little bit better in terms of competition in the Central?
Trade their team for the Indians ball club? That's about the only way they win in 2019. Now, the Indians, I think, are going to look to revamp their roster, too, because they know they can win with a depleted roster or a roster that is lesser in quality than this past season. That's why they're probably going to deal these guys with the bigger contracts like Corey Kluber, like Carlos Carrasco, or guys that are due for big money coming up in future seasons. So, and then Michael Brantley, I believe, is a free agent. They're going to lose him for sure, more than likely. They're not going to spend big bucks on him to bring him back, more than likely. And then they might trade their ace, Corey Kluber. They might trade Carlos Carrasco, but they're not going to trade both of those guys. It'll be one of the two. But still, that will be a significant loss. The thing is, with how bad the American League Central Division as a whole, outside of the Indians will still win the division without Kluber. I think without Carrasco for sure, and then it might just come down to the Twins getting better. Can the Twins get better enough and good enough to catapult the Indians for the Central Division crown? Because I see the Twins rebounding a little bit with a new manager now in Minnesota. after getting rid of Paul Molitor, so maybe the Twins have an outside shot at the division crown, but that's only going to be because of the fact that the Indians deal a guy or two, and the Twins significantly upgrade their ball club too going into 2019, Doc.
All right, time for our first timeout. We'll go into the break with your National League Hitter of the Year earning the Vito Award. Second half of the podcast, we're going to talk about some names that are being considered for the Hall of Fame, and also we do got a special guest. Brenden Kudla will join us here on this edition of Tigers Talk. Who is the National League Hitter of the Year? Who earns the Vito Award?
Christian Yelich. As easy as that for me, because I saw that at bat. I mean, just seeing some of his at-bats, man, and how he would work the count and then get these significant hits, hit for power, spray the ball all over the field, all parts of the ballpark, and then he hits for average. And he almost won the Triple Crown himself for a while there in the National League. So he is my National League best hitter, earning one of the Vitos Awards.
A Vito Award to Christian Yelich. Definitely well-deserved. All right, Vito, let's take our first time out. We'll come back right after this break.
And Doc, as you know, one of our fine sponsors at the Detroit Sports Podcast Network is the Detroit Sports Commission. And since 2001, the Detroit Sports Commission has been bringing marquee events to the Metro Detroit area, including the Zenith Prep Kickoff Classic, which once again I had the pleasure of working this past summer and hope to keep working with Marty Dobeck and the fellas at the Sports Commission. And you can find out much more about the DSC and all the events they are bringing to our very region by following the Detroit Sports Commission on Twitter and on Instagram at DET Sports. And also make sure to check out the organization's terrific website at DetroitSports.org. And now to our newest sponsor, Legacy Football. And Doc, as you know, I think already now, the Legacy Football organization was founded in 2009. It is the premier off-season development program in the state of Michigan, in the Midwest, and in the entire country. And the Legacy Football program provides unique platforms for student athletes on and off the playing field through community service, social awareness, education, and football. And once again, it features tons of former NFL players and collegiate stars as well, such as a former guest on Two Bad Hombres and former Michigan State linebacker and All-American linebacker Greg Jones. To find out more about Legacy Football, please contact National Director of Football Justin Sasante or go to www.legacyfootballorg.com. And back here on Tigers Talk with Chirco and company, and we'll get into the overall league MVP, handing out another Vito Award. And you just heard, well, we handed out two Vitos, didn't we? The Vito Award for the best NL hitter just recently, Christian Yelich, best AL hitter, JD Martinez. And like you said, it really disgusts you and I and all these Tigers fans that have to look at what the Red Sox did, getting JD Martinez and realizing the Tigers have nothing to hope for and to play for really in 2019. And they're not going to go out and sign a Bryce Harper or a Manny Machado, which we'll discuss with Brenden Kudla as well.
All right, before we get to the 10 names that are going to be considered by the Today's Game Era Committee for Hall of Fame induction next month, give me a couple more Vito Award winners.
I'm going to give you the NL Best Pitcher, okay? And the Vito Award for that belongs to, and very deservingly, Jacob deGrom, the ace of the New York Mets, who really could have won the award in August. As there was no, Max Scherzer. You could throw out Max Scherzer and you could say that he deserves it too. But deGrom, with his ERA, sub-1 or sub-2 all season long, he deserves the NL Cy Young, which I think he'll win easily. But also the Vito Award for the best NL pitcher in 2018.
All right, hit me with the AL Pitcher of the Year.
I think Blake Snell, and you look at his WAR, and it really stands out to me from the Tampa Bay Rays, a guy that didn't get a lot of love or praise this season. 7.5 WAR, according to BaseballReference.com, and I rest my case right there, really, with that selection for the AL Best Pitcher, and I'm going to hand out the Vito Award to Blake Snell for that.
The names that you sent me that are going to be considered by the Today's Game Era Committee, really solid names, obviously highlighted by Joe Carter. I mean, that's the guy that an early baseball memory that I had is when he hit that walk-off home run. I mean, that was one of the sentinel moments in baseball history. I mean, wow. To walk off a World Series with a home run. I mean, it was in Toronto, I believe.
In Toronto, in front of his home crowd. And
him jumping around.
Terrific scene, right? All-time. Legendary scene.
And that was juxtaposed against the pitcher that he hit it off of, Mitch Williams.
Mitch Williams of
Wild
the Phillies.
Thing,
How about the Wild Thing? Gave up that long bomb to Joe Carter. You're right.
And that was one of those distinct memories that we all have in terms of a guy, Mitch Williams, that was just really talented left-handed flamethrower, but just sometimes couldn't get it together, and Joe Carter made him pay, those teams. And that's why the podcast that you did, the Vito Sit Down with Pat Henkin, was so awesome. Go check it out on our platform, DetroitSportsPodcast.com. A really great podcast, a sit-down podcast you did with former Cy Young winner Pat Henkin, and they talk about how Cito Gaston, the manager that he was, and those Toronto teams were really special, back-to-back World Series victories, and that was a team that definitely people around here definitely gravitated towards, because in the 80s, the Tigers did battle a little bit with the Blue Jays for the division and things like that, so a lot of games played, a rivalry at the time, and one in which kind of has faded a little bit, but at the time when I was a youngster, it was a rivalry that you definitely peeked into, the Tigers and the Blue Jays and things like that. So Joe Carter's name's on the list. I see Will Clark, Oral Hershiser, Lee Smith, Harold Baines, Albert Bell. Other names, Vito?
George Steinbrenner, the former owner, longtime owner of the New York Yankees, who hired and hired Billy Martin like 5 times. The former Tiger skipper who won, a division crown with the Tigers back in 1972. Did you know they managed the Tigers, all these different teams Billy Martin did? But back to Steinbrenner, and I think Steinbrenner deserves to make it in. I don't know who else gets in from this Today's Game era ballot. And it will be considered for a Hall of Fame induction next month. These 10 names are Charlie Manuel, Lou Piniella, Davey Johnson, George Steinbrenner, Albert Bell, Harold Baines, Joe Carter, Will Clark, Oral Hershiser, and the former closer Lee Smith. So all of these are legendary figures in Major League Baseball that played the game or did something else in the game for a long time and successfully. I think it's Steinbrenner and then everybody else. Steinbrenner is for sure above the class or at the top of the class among these 10 names, Doc.
Joe Carter for sure, though, eventually is going to get in.
I don't think he will, no, because it's about more than that. I mean, you can look at, my dad has brought up Dale Murphy as a guy who played for the Braves, won 2 MVPs. It's about the overall career, though. Remember, you have to look at the overall career for these guys, an overall resume, and Carter doesn't have the resume that stacks up with the Hall of Famers that are already in.
You don't think the Today's Game era committee is going to look at that, especially the Sentinel moment that he had in terms of what he did overall? You don't think his numbers stack up?
No, they're not good enough to get in. So he had that great moment, but other guys have had that great moment, right? And in the sun, and under the bright lights, in the big games, in the postseason, in the World Series. I mean, Kirk Gibson, remember, did it too. Well, the Tigers in '84, the Dodgers in '88. Guess what? Is he in the Hall of Fame? No, he's not a Hall of Fame player.
Then another name here that maybe I think would get in, Oral Hershiser?
I like him more, but he didn't have the long-term success either. Had a few really good years, definitely. At least one Cy Young with the Dodgers. So great. Remember, the '88 team was the ace of the '88 World Series champion Dodgers, but he won't get in. A guy that I think will, maybe, has a chance at least, Charlie Manuel. Charlie Manuel was a hitting coach for all those good Indians teams. You remember that? In the late 90s, early 2000s, became the Indian skipper. Coach Jim Thome, he was influential in Thome's career. Thome's a Hall of Famer. Manny Ramirez was on those Indians teams. And then Manuel won that World Series with the Phillies and went to another World Series with the Phillies. So Manuel has an outside shot at least. But once again, it's clear-cut to me that Steinbrenner gets in. It's not clear-cut to me that anybody else gets in from this list of 10 names.
So how many more Vito awards do we have to give?
Well, the overall league MVP. So, the overall best player in the league. And that's it. I think we gave out the 2 pitchers. We gave out the 2 hitters. We said the best Tiger, Nick Castellanos.
Okay, so you got one more award. Let's do it now before we have your guest on to talk about baseball. Tell me, the league MVP, who gets the final Vito Award on this first annual edition of the Vito Awards?
By the way, I love how you say my name. Now, Mookie Betts will win it. Tony Paul said Mookie Betts. Dom Chirco said Mookie Betts. My dad said Christian Yelich. You had Pat Henkin who said Betts. Anthony Fennick said Betts. Joey Yashinsky threw in an oddball selection in Jose Ramirez from the Indians. And I'm going to say Mookie Betts myself. And we'll also get Brenden Kudla's opinion, but guess what? It's already a landslide victory for Mookie Betts.
Mookie Betts gets the final Vito Award for League MVP. Great stuff. Congrats to all the winners. I look forward to doing this.
They win a lot of money.
Yeah.
Or actually, they can donate money to the podcast network and to me. And now we'll get Brenden Kudla on the line to talk about his selection for overall league MVP and about where he thinks Bryce Harper will land and Manny Machado and maybe another guy or two, Doc.
Yeah, looking forward to the conversation. Let's dial him up.
Thanks to Brenden Kudla for joining us via Vito's VIP line on this edition of Tigers Talk, an off-season edition and kind of preview edition of Tigers Talk here. And Brenden, how are you doing working there at Ferris State?
It's good. Life's good. We're in the off season for baseball, so really I'm just waiting for the winter meetings and spring training. I only really have one sport to follow, and that is baseball with a little side of college football.
Well, you and I both love baseball, and we're excited about the offseason, Major League Baseball offseason that is, but really not for reasons related to the Tigers. At least not a lot of reasons related to the Tigers. So I want to dive into Major League Baseball as a whole and some top-tier free agents, starting with Bryce Harper, who I think we can now label as a former Nationals outfielder. Do you think I'm right in saying that? And where do you think Harper lands this offseason?
You know, my heart wants Bryce Harper to land somewhere where he's not going to go, and that's the Colorado Rockies. I just think he would absolutely dominate over there in the NL West with a little bit of the ability to pop the ball out of the yard and really stack up that lineup with him, Trevor Story. If they're able to sign DJ LeMahieu, great, but Arenado, I feel like that team would be unbelievable. They already made the playoffs this year, and just with the future, that would be something awesome, but they're probably too small of a market team for them, in all honesty, as much as I'd like to see him go there. One dark horse that doesn't like to spend money, but they've been on the back burner the past couple of years. I'm looking at the St. Louis Cardinals as a true potential landing spot for Harper there.
So, you know what, Brenden, we're hanging out in the BK Lounge, by the way. I know I've mentioned that before when you've been on, so I want to reiterate that. We are in the BK Lounge with Brenden Kudla. And Brenden, so we looked at Bryce Harper a little bit there. How about Manny Machado, who played shortstop with the Dodgers there because of Justin Turner playing third base, shortstop with the Orioles, who played third base as well with the O's. So not the best defender, but we know he can mash the baseball. Where do you think he lands this offseason?
You know, Machado, I want to see him end up back in the American League because he's very open about he's not a huge hustler, and maybe the DH spot will do well for him in the future. But all the rumblings I hear and all the stories I'm looking at send him to Philadelphia with all the money they have, and they want to make a big splash. I think they're going to overpay, and I think they're going to pick him up on a deal that might bite him in the butt towards the end, something we can all relate to here in Detroit with maybe the Miguel Cabrera ordeal. But I can see Machado ending up in Philly, and if I want to take a stab at it and say he does end in the American League, let's say do the Texas Rangers overpay for a big-name guy? I know in the past they got Alex Rodriguez. They paid crazy for him, but all signs are really pointing to Philly for Machado.
How about the Phillies or the White Sox going for Machado? I guess the White Sox right now are viewed as a dark horse. They haven't spent a lot of money or been relevant in a while now. What do you think about the White Sox maybe being in the mix for landing Manny Machado and maybe throwing the Philadelphia Phillies in there as well, who showed signs of being a competitive ball club for most of the season until tailing off down the stretch?
Yeah, they fell off down the stretch, and I saw that by J.P. Morosi talking about the White Sox coming into play for both Harper and Machado. Quite honestly, I just don't see it. I understand they have a low payroll. They're able to spend a lot of money. They're in a big market, even if they're considered a small market team. They're 29th in payroll in the MLB. Would I love to see them make a splash? No, because they're in the Tigers division, obviously. But they've never really spent money. Their payroll going into this year, it says, is around $14 million. You're going to pay Machado more than that in a year. How is that going to work in the locker room dynamic? I think there's a lot of things there that would have to play out that could be pretty interesting if they truly make a splash at Machado or Harper.
And the White Sox have never been a big market club. Now, I think of them acquiring, Adam Dunn. That stands out to me, and that was a big-time move in the day for the White Sox, who were trying to contend then, and maybe they're trying to compete once again. And then you look at our Detroit Tigers. They're not really trying to compete right now, and they're not going to win many games in 2019 once again. They might even lose 100 or at least 98 and finish 64 and 98 for a third straight campaign. So not a lot of positives for the Tigers going into the offseason because there's not a lot they're going to do. And when I say that, I mean in terms of acquiring big-time starting arms or big-time position players for sure. Now, guys they might look at and target are Edwin Jackson, some guys on the cheap, maybe a DJ LeMahieu, who went to, as we both know, Birmingham Brother Rice, and maybe he's reunited well with his hometown. What do you think about that feasibility, LeMahieu landing in Motown?
I don't know. I mean, I haven't read anything like it. I would be surprised if he came back to Detroit. I think he's young and he's playing pretty well. There's a chance he could end with a contender. One team I picture him with, and I know this might be a little wild, but if he ended up on the Cleveland Indians that are looking to make a move, they're looking to make a splash, they're not going to spend a ton of money, but maybe they'll make a run at LeMahieu. He'll sell them up in the infield at the plate a little bit too. Yeah, sure, it'd be great to see the Tigers land a talent like DJ LeMahieu, but I'm thinking Jordy Mercer or Denny Echeverria are more of the Tigers' free agents to grab up in the future, just to someone to play shortstop for the next year or two, because I don't think Ronnie Rodriguez or Nico Goodrum or any guys like that are necessarily going to be everyday shortstops. Pick up a guy that can hit 250 and let's lose a couple ball games and see what happens in the draft.
Danny Echeverria. That's how you say the last name. I hate that last name. It's so hard to say, Brenden. I butchered it, I know, earlier. But anyways, you nailed it, and that's why you're in the BK Lounge, and we're spending time in the BK Lounge here on Tigers Talk and kind of previewing the offseason. And, yeah, maybe the Tigers land Jordy Mercer. I mean, I could see him being landed. How about Freddie Galvis for the shortstop position, Brenden? What do you think about that possibility?
I think that would be awesome. That'd be a home run if the ability is there to grab him up. Someone that probably hasn't reached their ceiling yet, where the other two guys, I don't know if they really have a ceiling. That would be awesome to grab Galvis. I'd be all in. I don't know how much we'd have to pay for him because it looks like we're trying to do everything on the cheap as of right now. But sure, let's throw him in the mix, have him hit second, and see what happens from there. I'd be all aboard.
Yeah, better than Dewell Lugo or some other, I would say, internal options there. Now, how about Edwin Jackson for the Tigers rotation? How about adding him back to the Tigers rotation? Had a good campaign there, down the stretch for the A's and looks solid. He's a journeyman veteran arm. What do you think about him coming back to Motown?
Sign him up, bring him on board. Let's see if we can do something like we did with Liriano, and you pick up a guy and he helps out the franchise. And maybe even he goes a Mike Fears route and you could trade him because Edwin Jackson, obviously, he's no stranger to the trade deadline. I would be all on board for picking him up. I think the Tigers have a lot to do with their pitching staff is simply staying healthy. If Daniel Norris can give you a full year, what's going to happen? Along with Michael Fulmer and, to a degree, Zimmerman as well. Those guys, they can pitch. It's just a matter of can you throw a full season for us?
Yeah, and Kudla, it looks like they're going to pick up, a starting pitcher, a shortstop such as Mercer, Hechavarria, Galvis. So maybe the starting pitcher is not Edwin Jackson, but a sexier option such as Jeremy Hellickson. Maybe a slight sexier option in Drew Pomeranz, who wasn't great last year, or this past season, but was good in 2017. Now, I want to gear our conversation towards, for the last topic, your overall league MVP, which it won't be Freddie Galvis or anybody that we just mentioned. Who would you pick for the overall league MVP?
Christian Yelich.
Okay, and now why is that? Explain yourself, please.
I don't think anyone had as big of an impact on a club outside of Chris Davis for whatever team you want to choose. The Chris Davis, the Oakland A's, or the Baltimore Orioles, they both had pretty big impacts on their clubs. But Yelich, he's the closest you can get to getting the Triple Crown. Something we've only seen Miguel Cabrera do, and probably we might only see Miguel Cabrera do it in our lifetimes. Being able to be one at-bat away, what was there, two guys on? If he would have had a home run, he would have captured the Triple Crown with a tie and home run and leading the RBIs, that 163rd game of the season. I think that being able to do that, the second half that he put together for the ball club to put them in position to not only make the playoffs, have the best record in the NL, and have the driver's seat to get to the World Series. Obviously, you don't look at the playoff stats for the MVP, and his didn't fare too well in the postseason, but I think you got to give it to Yelich. He pretty much transformed that Milwaukee franchise with Lorenzo Cain and the late addition of Mike Moustakas. They're going to be a horse for the next couple of years. It's going to be fun to watch what happens over there in Milwaukee.
Well, that's 2 votes now for Christian Yelich for overall league MVP, and the other guy that voted for him is my dad. I think you have a little bit more baseball acumen than my dad. No offense to him, but hey, it's been nice hanging out with you in the BK Lounge. Big time pleasure of mine always speaking with you. Great stuff, and we'll talk again soon. All right?
Hey, thanks, Vito. Thanks for having me. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Talk to you soon, man. Appreciate the time. And back here on Tigers Talk, and that was Brenden Kudla with his insight on the offseason market, which free agents the Tigers could attain potentially, and on his overall league MVP, Doc. And I don't know if you think the same as him with Christian Yelich, but who is your selection, by the way, for overall league MVP? As that's the final and the best Vito award to give out, Doc.
The DOC definitely complies with everybody else that voted.
You love
Mookie
complying,
Betts,
don't you?
Yes, Mookie Betts obviously had a great season, part of the team that won the World Series, so all kudos to him. Vito Award winner, Mookie Betts, definitely league MVP. A well-deserved award for Mookie Betts, and with that comes a close. Another season of Tigers Talk. What a season we had. We went strong this season,
We
Vito.
did.
We went really long, so a week or two off, really up to you. I think it will give us a chance to reset, read a lot more, create more bits, and bring to you the great content that we were able to. I really enjoyed the Vito Awards. I'm glad we have an opportunity now to do it, and maybe next year we'll have the opportunity to expand it a little bit, a couple more categories. Keep these categories. Maybe we'll add just a couple more.
Something, yeah.
Exactly.
More, right?
Thanks to Brenden Kudla. Great podcast, sir. I definitely will connect with you talking baseball in a couple weeks or so.
Well, Doc, with that, yes, that was the first annual Vito Awards taking place. I hope you guys enjoyed my, award categories and award choices. And with that, I am saying adios to all of you out there.